Welcome to week 3 Remix Project Milestone. This week, you are again submitting work to show that you are on the right path working through the course. I want to mention something up front. Part of this Remix Project Milestone is for you to show that you're using reverbs and delays properly in your remix. You need to use what's called time-based routing, where you use a send on your track to route a signal over onto an auxiliary track, and the delay or the reverb is loaded up on the auxiliary track. If you've started this milestone after you've completed your Pro Tools Assignment 3, then you may think to yourself, I did that time-based routing thing in PTA 3. But if you're starting this before PTA 3 and you look and see something about time-based routing, you may go, I don't know what that is. So you'll want to make sure that you look at the steps that you're completing in Pro Tools Assignment 3. All I'm saying is that there is a component in this Remix Project Milestone, the time-based routing, that's going to come from the work, and you're going to understand that process from Pro Tools Assignment 3. Now, you're also working on additional tracking in your remix this month. So let's go look at your Remix Project guidelines. So for week 3, you're working on tracking instruments. Last week was tracking rhythm. This week, you're tracking instruments. As you were submitting your work last week and you were taking your screenshots, if you were feeling good about your drum tracks playing throughout the whole song, that's great. If you were thinking, yeah, I kind of like these, but I really want to make them better, then that's fine too. What I would say for this week is that you should have your drum tracks mostly finished before you move forward. In other words, you might still have some tweaks that you want to make to your drum tracks, but right now as you're starting, your drums play throughout the whole song. Maybe you don't have every fill that you want or every little breakdown that you want, but the drums play throughout the whole song, and it sounds like a cohesive performance. So when you move into tracking this week, you're going to work on what we see on the page: bass, pads, lead lines, melodic counterparts, atmospheres, ambiances, sound effects. And when you look at that at first, it might feel a little bit maybe overwhelming, like, wow, I've got to write all these different parts. Maybe you look at it and say that's a cinch. What I'm going to do here is point out some of the virtual instruments that you could look into related to the types of parts that you're writing. So as you can see at the top of the page, you know this from last week, you're only going to use the Air plugins and the Avid plugins that were part of the installs at the beginning of the month. No third-party plugins. So you've got plenty to work with here, and we're staying with what we got from our downloads. Now, as I move into the session, I want to point out something really important this week. You want to make sure that any of the other tracks, any of the other stems that are not vocals from the original stems that you've imported into Pro Tools, you want to take any of those that are not vocals and hide those and make them inactive in the session. So here I've got these 3 tracks. They're already muted. These 3, I'm going to go ahead and hide these and make them inactive. So you're only working with the vocals exclusively, no other parts. If you hear another part in the remix that you like and you say, wow, I'd really like to leave that in the remix, don't leave it in there. Write a part on your own that sounds something like that original part, but don't use that original stem. You're only using the vocal stems in the session, okay? Lead vocals, background vocals, totally fine. Also mentioning, you can record your own background vocals in here if you want. You could record some other vocal overdubs to play along with the vocals in your session if you want. You can do that side of your creativity. If that's where you want to take it there. But remember not to try to outshine what the original performance is. So having taken all the other stems that are not vocals and I've hidden them and made them inactive, I'm only working with the vocals in the remix. So for the bass part, the first line in the PDF here says that you could write a bass part. I would maybe take a look at Vacuum. Vacuum's a great 2-oscillator synth, some really cool presets to work with in here. Also have an arpeggiator down here on the bottom left, so you can experiment with the rate of the arpeggiator. And one other nice thing I like about Vacuum is here in the oscillator 1 section, just below this glowing tube, this button, if I double click it, I'll get random settings, and I can experiment with those settings and then tweak them from there. So that's kind of nice to see what you come up with just by getting random settings from double clicking that button. Also for bass parts, but also for everything else that's on that week 3 sheet, Tried and True Expand 2, Lots of different categories in here. Arpeggios, synths, bass parts, everything to really dig in and have some fun in the synth. Also, remember we have a 4-part synth? Well, we also have 4 arpeggiators that can run at the same time inside of Expand. So if you just had one part loaded with one arpeggiator running, that's fine. Or you could stack them all together and have some fun chaos happening inside of Expand. So that's another one that could take you through a lot of the different parts that you're working on. One other thing, what am I going to do about ambiances and sound effects? Where am I going to get those? Well, in Expand 2, you have an ambience and sound effects section in Expand 2. So you can really dig in and have some fun with that. Lead lines, melodic counterparts, remember Mini Grand. I really like the sound of Mini Grand. I think this sounds as good or better than some even fairly expensive paid grand pianos. So have some fun with that. Of course, have to mention DB33, our drawbar organ. If you feel that you need the organ sound in your remix or in what you're writing, then definitely experiment with this. Lots of great tones in there, and again, great presets to start with. And then, of course, I'm going to mention Structure Free. It's our 4-part sampler that you can use in Pro Tools. Inside of one of the parts here, you've got some presets that you can work with, all kinds of different synths and drums and various patches to work with. With what I've shown you there, you should have really no problem whatsoever getting inside of this part of the week and finding some very creative options for yourself. Your bass, your pads, vacuum, Expand 2, Mini Grand, DB33, Structure Free. Maybe even dig back into Boom and see what you can find in Boom. But remember, this is all about you getting into a creative session. If you sit down and in the first 5 or 10 minutes, nothing happens, well, don't get frustrated and walk away. Remember, this is part of your work this week. So you could even set a timer and say, you know what, I'm going to do this for a half an hour and see where I get. Set the timer for a half an hour and dig through. And if you're starting to gain some traction after a half an hour, you're heading in the right direction. If inspiration hits you in the first 5 minutes, well, you had a really great day. But some of this takes a little work, and you got to coax things out of yourself and out of your software. So most importantly, have fun with this. Now, what I want to remind you about is what you need to do is you need to make sure that you attend the lecture this week or you watch the archive. So if you have started early, you need to go register for that lecture and you need to attend the lecture live. If you cannot attend the lecture live, or if you've started after the lecture's taken place, you can go into the course resources section, go into the archive section, and you can find the Remix Project lecture for week 3, and you can watch that, and then you can use that to try to help to take the information here even further and apply these techniques into your remix. Remember, be patient with yourself. Remember, it's going to take time. Things don't fall into place absolutely perfectly. Have some fun. Any questions, reach out. Have a great week.